estimate that it's been about 12 to 14,000 years since Native Americans settled this area. The Europeans, as far as we know, the first ones that might have come through here would have been the Spaniards who were searching for gold. That was in the late 1500s. Within the next 100 years, the French were through here, mostly trappers trying to make a living off of pelts. There probably weren't a lot that wanted to come into this area because the Osage Indians considered this their hunting ground, and they were known to be a fierce tribe that didn't take kindly to people trespassing on them. So until after the Louisiana Purchase and whites started filtering into the area, it's the first known person that there's any written record of was a man named Frank Pierce. And he was following the White River, which joins with the Mississippi and loops all the way up in Missouri before it comes back down into this area. And he made it as far as the West Fork. We don't know how far upstream he came. That was in 1819. He spotted a herd of buffalo and was planning on shooting one for his dinner. And then he spotted a band of Osage who were also hunting and decided to kind of hunker down under a big elm tree and then slip off. He actually crossed what is now the town side of Fayetteville on his way into what's now Oklahoma to connect with the Arkansas River and go back downstream. So in the days before roads or even wagon trails, that was the route, was following the river. It was the easiest way to go. And as you know, the White River isn't always full of water, so it wasn't that hard for early settlers to come up here. We don't really know if the river was the main way settlers came into this area. They could have gone up the Arkansas to what's now Fort Gibson in Oklahoma and come across country, which a lot of them did. That route closed off by around 1830 when the federal government started moving the eastern Indian tribes into what became Oklahoma Territory. So after that, people either had to come to Washington County from Fort Smith up across the mountains or up through Springfield and down. Arkansas became a state in 1836. By that time, there were quite a few people living here, although they didn't have deeds because there was no government. So there were quite a few within the first 2 years after statehood who formally filed land claims on land that they had been on for a while. They built their homes out of logs. Some of them built with rock. They faced buffalo herds and bear, panther, and wolves. Bear bacon and bear fat were primary staples of the larder. They also, of course, had venison, rabbit, squirrel, other wild meat. Their crops were primarily corn, wheat, and other grains. They grew cotton and tobacco and a few vegetables. Their livestock included horses, mules, cattle, hog, chicken, and they also raised, most of them, a few sheep so that they could have wool. Most of them wore buckskins. They cooked in their fireplaces, and they taught their children how to read for several years before there were any schoolhouses established, which were also church buildings. So everyone who built homesteads in the valley south of Fayetteville were said to be from West Fork. So it didn't matter if they were at Greenland or Woolsey, they were from West Fork. Actually, the deed records from 1840 and 1850 show that almost no one lived south of West Fork. It was a wilderness down there toward Winslow and rugged land, and the valley got narrow, so there was less arable land for them to plow, so that was not the favored place. Up around Greenland, where the valley is really wide and the topsoil is really deep, is where most of them wanted to settle. A man named Eli Boyd was one of the first settlers that located on the West Fork. The Goodspeed book from 1889, that is the history of Washington County, says that for the first year he was here, he and his family lived on the flesh of wild animals alone. I think they probably also looked for honey trees. And his father, William Lloyd, immigrated from Scotland in 1770. Eli was their oldest child. After the Revolutionary War, the family moved to Kentucky. Eli married in 1806, and he and Eli and his wife brought everything they owned to Arkansas on a two-wheel cart pulled by oxen. They walked. In fact, supposedly his wife walked behind the cart to pick up any kernels of corn that spilled from their bags. At the time that he was here, in 1823, the nearest store was in southern Missouri, the nearest mill was at Natural Dam, and the nearest neighbor, a man named Billingsley, lived at Hogeye. So it was very isolated. He also was a good citizen. He helped build the county's first courthouse in Fayetteville and sat on the first jury. And when you drive up Mineral Springs Road, you're climbing up Bloyd Mountain. If you've ever seen that on a map, now you know why it's named that. Other pioneers of the area early were John and Christley Harness, Samuel Mays, P. and J.H. Estes, Jacob Coates, Alexander and John Rutherford, George Reed, Zadok Wynn, Ambrose and Strangeman Hutchins, Dick Dye, and Andrew Carnes. Now, the Dye Creek is named after Dick Dye, and there's still a Carnes supervising West Fork schools. There were some that weren't that happy with staying here for whatever reason. One family moved to Texas because it was getting too crowded, and that was in 1845. But all these people were primarily from Scotland, Ireland, England, quite a few from Germany, a few from France, and then there were some whose heritage was several generations already in the colonies that were hard to research where that they may have originated. But the ones who didn't go to Texas because it was too crowded here really got the gold rush fever in 1848, headed out to California for the gold rush. At the same time, Oregon Territory had opened, and so a lot of them were thrilled with the offer that was available out there, which was 640 acres if they would homestead it. So there were several wagon trains of people from here that left in 1852, which was a year that over 70,000 people traveled the Oregon Trail. And with that many people driving herds of cattle and horses and pulling their wagons, the trail became completely desolate of grazing. So cattle started to die. And then the dead and dying cattle polluted the rivers, so a lot of people died on the trail. I haven't taken a hard count, but of the settlers who left our area for Oregon that year, about half of them died before they got there. Most of them stayed out there. Understandably, who would want to go make that trip back? But there were a few that wrote back, and that's where I get this information. There's great material that I included in the book from the Oregon pioneer history of some of the family members from here that went out there. So one man that went out to the gold fields was a man named Jesse Gilstrap. And Jesse came back evidently with enough money. He bought into an existing mill that was sited just this side of Brentwood on the west side of the river. And actually there's a curve in the highway there. The mill is on the south side of the river. This became known as Gilstrap's Mill, and that was one of the first places where mail for anybody in the West Fork Valley was delivered at Gilstrap's Mill. Later, the mail was delivered for West Fork to a mill at Woolsey. And at that point, Woolsey became a bigger settlement. The mill and the store, Woolsey, burned during the Civil War. That was the policy of both sides, was to burn the mills so that the people couldn't survive and support the troops. It wasn't until the railroad came through in 1882 that West Fork, the town, existed. And it was actually platted in 1885. McKnight, any of you are familiar with that name, was kind of the father of West Fork. He was the one who organized the group of men who filed the plat in the town incorporation papers. Greenland and Winslow did not exist before the railroad came through. Woolsey was the largest commercial center until the Civil War. But actually, if you look at a map from 1854, you'll see a place marked as Taney is the only thing between the mountains and Fayetteville. And Taney, no one knows exactly why it was named Taney, but it was established by a man named William Shores. And he moved away from Taney just before the war to just south of White Rock. And Shores Lake is named after him. There was no road where 71 is. The problem for a road in that route that was only overcome by heavy machinery in the early 1900s was the approximation between the road, the river and the bluffs. Now, there are a couple of places where you can, even now, see the roads buckled and dipping because the river is steadily undermining the roadbed. So all the traffic south from Fayetteville came down Cato Springs Road, veered off at Greenland to come down through Campbell Community. And Campbell Road over here is what's left of that road. That's the original road south. Now, if you stayed on Cato Springs Road and went through Hogeye and Strickler, that was actually the primary route. That's the telegraph wire route south toward Fort Smith. Nobody wanted to try to climb the mountains at Winslow. But if you came down through West Fork and continued south to, at the intersection at Woolsey, you could either go straight down the Wind Creek Road to Crest near Blackburn, or you could ford the river at Woolsey, which is one of the reasons why Woolsey was important, is because that's where people forded the river. And then from there, they could go south toward what's now Winslow. And that was the main road. One other route south for people who lived east of the river was to cut through what's now Fayetteville's industrial park area, come down Pump Station Road. There was an early mill. In fact, the earliest mill in the south part of the county was at the place most of us know as Tilly Willie. And that was where they forded the river to come south. So the old Indian paths across the summit at Winslow were used by people who lived in the valley. Farmers, some farmers wanted to take crops to market, and they had to haul those wagons up the mountains at Winslow to get their closest route down to Van Buren so they could load them on barges to go down the river. So that was a nightmare. The first stage service through the West Fork Valley was started by a man named Elijah Woolham. He established his stage service in the mid-1870s. He built an inn and a stagecoach stop at the place that he called Summit Home, which is now Winslow. And you can still see the mound where his inn was. You go off 71 over to the right where the old school was and go around behind the schoolyard, you'll see a mound in the playground area, and that's the site of his inn. It was used actually as the depot while they were constructing the railroad, and only after the railroad was finished, the name changed to Winslow because that was the railroad superintendent's name. He's also the one that named Winslow, Arizona after himself.
Was he standing on the corner?
Exactly. So by 1877, the West Fork Valley was known as a terror to civilization. This was because there were several young men in this area, valley families, who contributed to this reputation because they were veterans of the war. They'd gone into war at the age of 19 or 20 or 21, and their formative years were killing, and everything, everything was determined by guns. Also, this particular area was very friendly to people who wanted to hide out. There were caves, and it was hard to find, and you could always run up a ravine and hide from somebody. So there were a lot of people during the Civil War and after the Civil War that sympathized with both sides, either side, that took advantage of that part of the valley. So those two things went together to make, by the 1880s, this West Fork Valley as close to the old Wild West as anywhere in Washington County. And a lot of the things that happened were made regular news in the local and state newspapers. There were gunfights, barn burnings, drunken brawls. I'm going to read you a report from the Little Rock paper. I read this before, so I apologize if you're hearing this for the second time, from a talk that I did a couple of years ago. This is all quote. News has reached here of a bloody affray between the Rutherfords and Grahams of West Fork, two families who have made themselves notorious as desperados. Cal Rutherford, Deputy United States Marshal of this district, was drunk and running the town. And after riding his horse through 2 or 3 stores and shooting at everything in sight, rode in the store owned by Jacob Yoes, United States Marshal, Western District of Arkansas, and there found Jim Graham. He began cursing and abusing him and threatened to kill him. He then jumped from his horse and rushed at Graham, who drew his knife and stabbed Rutherford 5 times in the breast and bowels, when Bob Rutherford intervened and Graham stabbed him twice. Bob Rutherford rushed for a pistol, securing one in the store, with which he did lively work, shooting Graham several times, only one shot taking effect, which will prove fatal. A bystander, Mac Matthews, made an effort to quell the row, and Bob Rutherford crushed his skull with a pistol. Cal Rutherford will probably die from the wounds, and Bob may recover. The sheriff and constable took charge of the parties and had them under heavy guard. That was from February the 2nd, 1892. So let me say, first of all, that this gun and knife fight occurred in the only surviving original building of West Fork, which is the building where the old Opry it takes place. Well, there's blood on the floor somewhere. But this event did not occur out of thin air. 2 years earlier, Cal Rutherford had been one of several witnesses at a trial for Jim Graham. Graham was accused of burning 2 barns that belonged to David Hope. Now, the Hope homestead is still standing. It's just north of town on Campbell Road. The Hope family moved in that area after the war. So Graham had gone to trial on these charges of burning the barns, he and another guy. And he was found guilty. He appealed it to the state Supreme Court. The state Supreme Court overturned the conviction. He went to trial again, was found guilty again, appealed again, and ended up being turned loose. So I think Rutherford probably rightfully decided that Graham got off too light, and that's what started the fight. I'm currently working on more research about Jim Graham, barn burning, and He was he was a grandson of one of the earliest settlers in the area. So there's much more in my book about the West Fork Valley. This is just teaser stuff. I've really enjoyed researching all this stuff. I've lived in this area, Bone Marrow Springs Road, since 1973. And it was several years after that that I discovered that my dad's grandparents had moved into the Brentwood area in the 1870s. And that really gave me a fresh connection to why this felt like home. I'm thrilled to see you all here. I hope I'm not the only crazy person that's so interested in history. It's fascinating to me how these people lived, all the things that happened, how that made this area a unique place. The books are available on Amazon if you want to order one. They retail for $23.95. I'm selling them today for $20. Like I said, I don't want to make change. But they'll also be stocked at the Why Not Cafe. And I'm donating one to the library. So please enjoy the refreshments. And do you have any questions?
Did the Spaniards find any gold in the area? And where?
We don't know. There's no record of it. They've tried to track the routes of the Spanish explorers. And the last thing I read, the most recent research, shows that they didn't actually even come into northwest Arkansas. They followed a track that took them, that came up the White River for a ways, but when they got up near Batesville, they cut down into the Ouachitas, across the middle of the state. Somehow they ended up in northern Mexico and southern Colorado before they either died or gave up and went home.
Well, I'm interested in the book because I started researching the information about West Fork, the history of West Fork. I really enjoyed her talk because she came up with names that I have found in my research and some information I have found, and so it inspires me to again start back into my research. There were some discrepancies also that I'm going to research back in to see where I got my information from that maybe wasn't correct.
I love local history. I like learning about people, what they did in the past, and what we can learn now from the past. So this book that I've been working on, the history of the West Fork Valley, not only covers the early pioneers that came in here and built their homes and raised their families, many of which are still descended here, still living in the area, but also the towns that they created, the livestock and crops they raised, how they made the railroad come through this part of the county, and even a chapter on the crimes that some of these people committed. Some of the history that I found most fascinating was the history of the Civil War. There weren't any major battles of the Civil War fought in the West Fork Valley, but they could hear the battle at Prairie Grove down here. They said the gunfire sounded like popcorn. Little things like that really bring it to life for me. And so I'm happy to have people that are interested in reading a book like this. It gives you a greater sense of being rooted in a place and having more perspective about your life now.